loyal servant to the true emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. This man never existed. The betrayed general, the slave who became a gladiator, the man who defied an empire for honor. It is the perfect story. But what if I told you that the truth is infinitely more brutal, more epic? Everything is a construction. A legend distilled by Hollywood to tell us a story of revenge that we love, whose story is not about the revenge of a family, but about the survival of the known world. The right hand of the philosopher emperor, Marcus Aurelius, a man whose true legacy was erased by time. Forget fiction. Reality is much more terrifying. We are in the year 166 after Christ, and more important, that behind the ghost of Maximus hides a man of flesh and blood, but whose actions prevented Western civilization from collapsing 100 years before its time. And at the center of that storm, there was no gladiator, but a general, a strategist. The Roman Empire seems invincible, a superpower that stretches from the mists of Britannia to the sands of Mesopotamia. This is not a tale about one man against an emperor. It is a story of an empire against the apocalypse. A devastating plague brought by the legions returning from the east has annihilated millions, peoples ready to erase Rome from the map. They do not want to conquer, they want to annihilate. Morale is on the ground, and on the other side of the Danube, in the dark and cold forests of Germania, something is stirring. They are not disorganized tribes. For the first time, Marcomanni, Quadi, and Sarmatians have united a confederation of, but it is an illusion. It is a giant with feet of clay, and it is about to break. They see weakness. They smell blood. And their leader, Ballomar, launches the greatest invasion that the empire has seen. Entire cities have become cemeteries. The imperial treasury is exhausted, emptied by a distant war and internal corruption. He needs someone in whom he can trust his life. The future of Rome, everything. His resume was that of the Roman elite, a methodical and brilliant rise through power. This is not a border war. It is a struggle for survival. And on the throne, Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher. Centuries, they cross the frozen Danube and burn everything in their path. Entire legions are massacred. He knows he cannot do it alone. His armies are decimated by the plague. His generals are incompetent or traitors. The border collapses for the first time in generations. A barbarian army is on Italian soil. Panic takes hold of Rome. The man who wrote about inner peace and reason is forced to become what he hates most. A warlord. However, his tome, discovered by chance in 2008, tells a story that eclipses any Hollywood script. Who was this man whose career was so spectacular that Marcus Aurelius himself called him an intimate friend? To begin with, he was not a Hispanic farmer. He was an aristocrat born in Brescia, in northern Italy. His name is Marcus Nonius Macrinus, and he is the true Maximus. Marcus Nonius Macrinus. In the heart of one of the wealthiest and most influential families, he was not a man forged in revenge, but in duty. He does not need a politician. He does not need a bureaucrat. He needs a weapon. He needs his best friend. He was a quaestor managing the finances of the empire. He was a praetor dispensing justice. His name does not resonate in popular culture. There are no movies about him. He was a consul, the highest office of the Republic, now a prestigious honor under the empire. And crucially, he was governor of Pannonia, one of the most volatile provinces on the Danube border. Combat. It was his mind. Macrinus was a master of logistics, war of attrition, and psychology. He saw clans, loyalties, and weaknesses that he could exploit. His greatest weapon was not his sword, nor his skill in single. He understood that wars were not won with heroic charges, but with secure supply lines, precise intelligence. He knew the enemy, He had studied their tactics, their mentality, and their divisions. He did not see a faceless horde. It is not a request, it is a desperate plea. In the command tent, the air is freezing. And not just because of the Germanic winter, the other generals murmur in terror, and breaking the enemy's morale before the first sword clashed. And now the emperor has called him. When he finally speaks, his voice is calm but cuts the air like the edge of a scalpel. We will not give them the glorious pitched battle they crave. We are going to bleed them dry. We will cut their supplies. We cannot defeat them in a single battle. They are too many and our army is broken. Unite their enemies and provoke rebellions in other parts of the empire. It would be the beginning of the end. The plague has taken 1 out of every 3 legionaries. Panic has done the rest. We will not fight their way. They plead with Marcus Aurelius to return to the safety of Rome. Macrinus remencil. Listening, he sees what they do not see. Retreating is not an option. Showing weakness will only embolden the tribes. His title comes Augustorum, companion of the emperor. His mission to do the impossible. We will burn their rear villages. We will harass them day and night with our cavalry. How do you lead men who already feel dead? How do you inspire an army of ghosts to face an avalanche? Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher who preached virtue, notes, he gives Macrinus supreme command of the legions on the Danube. They are farmers, blacksmiths, and citizens who now wait for death, whether by the fever that consumes their lungs or by it is a scorched earth strategy, ruthless and without honor. But it is the only chance they have. They propose retreating, abandoning entire provinces, and fortifying a line further south. Barbarians' axe lurking in the forest. They know they are abandoned. They know Rome is far. They know they are a sacrifice. This is the army that Marcus Nonius Macrinus inherits. It is not an army, it is an open and festering wound. We will make the winter their worst enemy. We will make them die of hunger, of cold, and of fear. More than 30,000 men. But the plague has taken their strength, and fear has devoured their spirit. But Macrinus faces an immediate problem, one that not even all strategic genius can easily solve. A lesser leader would have given a speech, would have spoken of glory, of honor, and of duty to Rome. His first enemy is not on the other side of the river. It is within his own ranks. His first battle will not be for territory, but for the soul of his own legions. That same afternoon, he summons all the cohorts. In front of thousands of silent legionaries, he must clean his house. His solution was not an inspiring speech, it was an act of surgical cruelty. Violence. It is caught with a look, with an example, and its only cure is eradication. He knows that a soldier's soul is not fed with promises, but with steel and bread. And before forging his men, Macrinus stands on an elevated platform. He does not raise his voice. He speaks with an icy calm that freezes more than the... Macrinus knows that those words are empty air for men who have forgotten the taste of decent food. Merit is the only currency. Survival is the only ideology. The terror of incompetence must be greater than the terror of the... He becomes the chief quartermaster of the army, the chief doctor, the chief engineer. Why? Because he understands a fundamental truth of war. An army does not march on its glory, it marches on its stomach. Enemy. But fear is only a tool. Once you have their attention, you must give them a reason to live. Now that he has attended to their bodies, Macrinus must conquer their minds. Danube wind itself. He points to the officer's cowardice. He says, is a plague faster than the one running through your pulse? The message is brutal and clear. As water, blue blood and political connections no longer mean anything on this border. Who can bleed and die? And for this, he resorts to the oldest and most effective psychological warfare. Hate are now the bolt. The army is being born again, forged not in hope, but in necessity, not in glory, but in a shared fury. He immerses himself in the most basic logistics, which his aristocratic predecessors considered unworthy. possible. And a man who believes in tomorrow can be convinced to fight for it. Their own farms and their own cities. They no longer fight for an abstract concept called Rome. They fight so that woman is not their wife, so that child is not their son. For Tullus men, the end is a certainty. They do not fight for victory, they fight for a dignified death. A man who sleeps on dry straw, eats warm bread, and drinks clean water is a man who can start to believe that tomorrow is. The Danube border ceases to be a line on a map. It becomes the door to their own house, and they, the army of ghosts. He needs to erase the image of the barbarian as an invincible monster and replace it with that of a flesh and blood enemy. They are a sharp and brutal tool, and now they await the hand of their master. They do not have to wait long. Their rams hit the gates. Their assault ladders scratch the walls. For every warrior who falls, two more take his place. At dusk on the second day, Macrinus's force reaches its destination, exhausted. At the limit of their endurance, a scout arrives at a gallop to the camp, his horse covered in foam, a vital outpost, the Castellum of Azali. The legate in charge, a veteran named Tullus, has sworn to resist until the last man, but his message is clear without aid. They want us to move the bulk of our legions toward the mountain pass. They will ambush us in the narrow valleys where it is a bait, a test. The enemy wants to see if the watchdog of Rome still has teeth. The report is a hammer blow. Macrinus turns to his cornisan. The trumpeter, there is no great speech, only a two-word order. Sound the charge. It is a necessary sacrifice. It is a bait, says Servianus, his voice echoing with cowardly logic. They ignore the massive warriors and throw themselves upon the rear. Their swords cut the tent ropes, collapsing shelters. Their javelins fly toward the command groups that try to organize. But their main weapon is fire. The warriors who were assaulting the fort stop and turn, their brains unable to process the nightmare that unfolds behind them. Where have they come from? How many are there? It is the main army. Doubt, more lethal than any sword. The disorganized barbarians throw themselves against them in furious charges. It was the obvious play sacrifice the pawn to save the king. And precisely because of that, Macrinus knew it was a deadly trap, but not the one his generals saw. The true trap was not in the mountain pass, but they crash against a wall of wood and steel. It is Roman logic against Germanic fury, and logic is winning. They advance in perfect formation. Their large shields, the scuta, are overlapped, creating an impregnable wall. Each legionary is protected by the man at his side. They fight not as individuals, but as a single organism. They are the scalpel that removes the tumor on the other side of the wall, inside the fort. It is not a path. It is a tortuous line through impenetrable forests, frozen swamps, and we will not march toward their ambush. We will do what they do not expect, what they consider impossible. The fury that Macrinus instilled in them is not unleashed in wild shouts, but in a cold and murderous efficiency. His mission, a forced march of 80 kilometers in 36 hours, without stopping, in total silence. The sound of Roman horns is not a signal of attack, it is a signal of resurrection. Tullus does not have to give the order. The 10th is here, the general has come, the main gate, splintered and broken, is no longer a barrier that protects them, it is a cage that contains them. The Marcomanni are trapped, attacked from the front by the relentless march of the legionaries, harassed at their rear by the suicidal charge of the garrison, and surrounded by a circle of fire and ghost riders who, Roman losses are minimal. Macrinus enters the devastated fort. Tullus, exhausted and wounded, greets him with a nod, appear and disappear from the smoke. The battle becomes a massacre. Macrinus's genius resides not in his courage. The order is simple. Stop harassing, start hunting. At dam, Silence returns to the valley of Azali. This was not a border skirmish. It was not a lucky defense. It was a declaration to take with them as many enemies as possible. The main gate begins to splinter and give way, which controls a strategic pass through the mountains, is about to be overrun by a force of 10,000 Marcomanni. He shows them the face of the war that awaits them if they fail. He shows them the fate of their own families. They contemplate the spectacle from the heights. They see the vast barbarian camp, a sea of tents and bonfires, and they see 500 Romans, 500 men against 10,000, the eagles against the wolves. Panic is a poison, and Macrinus's cavalry is the needle that injects it directly into the enemy's jugular. The massive warriors concentrated on crushing the fort. They are blind, deaf, and drunk on their imminent victory. They will fall before the next new moon. It is an honorable sacrifice, and for Macrinus's advisors, 10,000 Marcomanni, led by one of Ballomar's lieutenants, have surrounded the garrison of Azali. They create chaos, softerro, and turn the enemy rear into a funeral pyre. Numbers are of no use. We will lose the fort, yes, but we will save the army. We will save Italy. It is the only logical move. The other officers nod in somber agreement. The logic of fear is always the most seductive. He was not going to lose a legion in an ambush. He was going to lose an entire army to a crisis of faith. Behind the fire and panic comes disciplined death. Macrinus's legionaries are not a horde. They are a killing machine. We will not sacrifice anyone, he says, and the silence in the tent becomes dense. It was in the mind of his own men. If he let the garrison of Azali die, every word he had said, every reform he had made, would turn to ashes. Fear would return. Distrust would rot. And the army he had just rebuilt would crumble from within, spreads through their ranks. And at that precise moment of hesitation, the second act of Macrinus's mortal symphony begins. He leans over the map, and his finger traces a route that makes the other officers pale. 2 cohorts of legionaries, the toughest and fastest, and all the auxiliary Gallic cavalry, 3,000 men in total. His men, who minutes ago were preparing to die, now roar with a renewed strength. He will leave the main army in the camp, keeping up appearances. He will take an elite force and the foothills of the mountains hunting territory of the barbarians. His plan is a calculated madness. It is the hammer and anvil tactic. Executed to perfection in the darkness and chaos will be their perdition. They march during the whole night, and all the next day, the cold bites their bones. To fall upon the enemy's rear like a vengeful ghost. It is a race against time and a bold bet that the enemy's arrogance, hunger gnaws their stomachs. But they press on, driven by a discipline that now runs deeper than fear. He sees that the enemy's left flank is about to collapse in a disorganized flight. Thousands of barbarian bodies cover the earth, their faces frozen in a grimace of surprise and terror. It is not the discipline of the centurion's whip, but faith in the man going at the head. But in his vision, he does not see a battle. He sees flows of men, pressure points, and breaking moments. Macrinus has not avoided a war. He has declared it. And the response of the barbarian horde will not be fear. Macrinus does not go on a horse in the rear. He goes on foot in the vanguard, sharing the same misery as his men. He does not see the defeat of his lieutenant. He sees the mind of the man who orchestrated it, a general who does not think. The message of the massacre at Azali will travel fast through the frozen forests until it reaches the ears of King Ballomar. He has shown them that he values their lives, and now they trust him with theirs without hesitation. Ballomar feels no fear. He feels respect, the respect of one predator for another. He reserves his final blow for that moment. The signal is for the cavalry that has been harassing the edges. But this victory, as crushing as it may be, is only the beginning. He has not rescued a fort. He has struck a hornet's nest. In Azali, hell has arrived. The Marcomanni, sure that no aid will come, throw themselves into a final assault. They do not need words. It is the silent respect of warriors. They have achieved the impossible like the others. A general who uses speed as a weapon, deception as a shield, and brutality as a message. Of Rome, from history, victory is a powerful tonic for an army that was on the brink of collapse. It is a rebirth, a force of 10,000 warriors annihilated, not defeated, but eradicated. On his improvised throne, Ballomar. He knows the name of the ghost that has emerged on the border, Marcus Nonius Macrinus. It will be an apocalyptic fury. The news travels in whispers through the snow, a destroyed outpost. It is a thick, heavy silence, broken only by the moans of the dying. The field is a slaughterhouse. The man who united the enemy tribes for the first time in a century understands the truth instantly, forcing it to go deeper and deeper into a hostile and empty territory. He is changing the battlefield from the border to the... Macrinus now has their unconditional loyalty. His veterans would follow him to hell itself. But while his men celebrate, he and Marcus Aurelius, in constant communication through imperial couriers, and he knows that this man must be crushed, not with a battle, but with a tidal wave of force that erases his name, and that Macrinus's scouts return with reports that freeze the blood. Ballomar has summoned the great horde. They have burned their own villages. There is no possible retreat for them. It is victory or total annihilation. But for Macrinus, it is the opening move in the greatest chess game in history. Macrinus faces an impossible mathematical equation. He cannot face them in the open field. It would be suicide. It is not an army that is heading for the Danube. It is a nation on the move. He needs a new plan. A plan so fast, so risky, and so contrary to all Roman military doctrine that his own men will believe, bowels of the empire, he is letting hunger, disease, and winter become his invisible legions. He has gone mad. His decision is incomprehensible. He orders a general withdrawal, not a retreat. He cannot hide behind his walls. The horde will simply pass by, leaving his legions isolated and surrounded to then die of. We will give it to them, and we will make every step they take in it a swallow of poison. The cities must be evacuated. The land itself must become a weapon. If they want this province, he writes to the emperor. More than 200,000 warriors and behind them, their families, their wagons, and their livestock. It is a defense in depth, taken to its most brutal extreme. Macrinus is stretching the supply lines of the horde, but a calculated cession of territory, the border forts for which the Romans have bled for a century, must be abandoned. He is sacrificing the land to save his people, drawing the monster into a trap from which it will not be able to escape. Face a new and terrifying reality. The victory at Azali has unified them in a common hatred, hunger. The war has changed. The strategy that gave him victory at Azali, the quick and precise attack, is now useless. For the soldiers who execute the order, it looks like a defeat. For the advancing barbarians, it looks like an easy victory. They do not come to loot, they come to stay. They come to replace Roman civilization with a new order born of fire and steel. He has abandoned the board to build a new one where he controls all the pieces. Macrinus' strategy unfolds in a brutal silence. For Ballomar and his people, the beginning is a celebration, but the celebration turns to ash in their mouths. Literally. The water is contaminated, and the food has been burned. The great army of Caesar flees before them. They feel like the invincible heirs of an empire that is crumbling. Every kilometer they advance south, going deep into the heart of Roman territory, does not make them stronger, but weaker. The great hunt has begun, but now the question is, who is the hunter and who is the prey? For weeks, the livestock they brought with them starts to die. Unable to graze on the poisoned land, victory feels hollow. They take fort after fort, city after city, and find them empty. They laugh at Roman cowardice. The empire does not fight them. It is devouring them. This is the true genius of Macrinus's plan. It is a psychological war fought with hunger as the main weapon. For the legionaries, it is torture. It absorbs the blow, inflicts a disproportionate damage, and then vanishes. Continuing the march toward the south, he does not attack Ballomar's army, he attacks its cohesion. A warrior can march for days on an empty stomach. Macrinus's scouts find what he has been looking for. It is not a fortress. It is a natural cage, a valley near the city of Tame, driven by the promise of glory. But he cannot ignore the crying of his hungry child, trying to stop the Roman withdrawal, to force them to fight. But Macrinus's rearguard is a lethal beast, purpose. And now they see it. They build ditches and embankments, and sharpen thousands of stakes to create a field of death, reminder of their apparent flight. The discipline forged in the victory of Azali is tested to the limit. It is yours by right of conquest. A deafening roar, the sound of 200,000 throats, responds to his call, drawing the horde deeper and deeper into the trap. After almost 2 months of withdrawal, why do they flee? Why do they give up the land for which their fathers fought? It is a duel of wills on a continental scale. Macrinus's war is not against the men with axes. It is against the families that follow him. Revelation. They were not fleeing, they were choosing. All the suffering, all the humiliation of the withdrawal had for the Romans, it is the last wall protecting their world from annihilation. There is no retreat. There is no tomorrow. Aquileia. Wide enough for the horde to enter, but with flanks so steep that their overwhelming numerical superiority would. For the horde, it is the last chance to reach the promised land, the paradise Ballomar told them about. The bait has been bitten. The wounded and desperate horde faces the disciplined and prepared army. Everything is decided here and now. Ballomar calls upon his gods and his ancestors. He reminds his warriors of their children's hunger and the weeks of suffering in the desert that the Romans created. Senate. But here, in this slaughterhouse, carefully prepared by Marcus Nonius Macrinus, this is the end of the road. The Roman army entrenches itself. The fleeing dog has turned around and now shows its fangs. The trap is ready. The order echoes through the ranks. Halt. Turn. Die. The confusion of the legionaries transforms into an electrifying, be useless. The river would cut off their advance and break their charge. This is the place, the end of the chessboard. Everything has been reduced to this, a valley. A river. A day. The future of the Roman Empire will not be decided in the pop. Every day they march south, turning their backs to the enemy. They hear the barbarian war horns behind them, a constant. Ballomar, desperate, tries to force the battle. He launches his best warriors in lightning attacks. They will fight like cornered wolves. But they are not soldiers, they are a mob. You are the legion. It is the sound of hunger about to be unleashed. Macrinus does not speak of glory or gods. He speaks of realities. Look at them, he says, his voice calm, cutting the air. They are hungry. They are desperate. He points to the wall of shields. Behind that wall of wood and steel is everything close. Food. Land. Revenge. Take it. Trust the steel in your hands. Trust the man at your side. Trust this ditch you dug. The charge of the horde is a cataclysm, but Macrinus's trap is activated. The first wave trips and falls in the hidden from their elevated position. Massacre them. It is a brutal combat. A fight for every centimeter of land, ditches. Those who follow are impaled on the sharpened stakes. The irregular terrain and the river break their cohesion, and there is no roar in response. Only the sound of 1,000 shields struck rhythmically. A heartbeat. A war drum. Make them pay with blood for every step they take. Remember Azali. Show them why the world fears Rome. Ballomar, from the rear, watches with growing desperation as the strength of his army bleeds against the Roman defenses. Panic. The nightmare of any general is unleashed, trapped by the front, by the rear, And by the flanks, a general who understood that to save civilization, one must sometimes unleash hell. From the Roman walls, hell is unleashed. It is a massacre at a distance before a single sword is crossed. He sees that he is losing, that he has been outplayed, and in that moment, Macrinus plays his final card. The first wave is decimated, but the sheer mass of the horde pushes them forward. Finally, they crash against the Roman wall. The true trap closes. It was not just the valley, it was the hills. Two Roman forces of several thousand men charge downhill, not against the front of the battle, but against the completely exposed flanks in the rear of the horde. The battle becomes a carnage. At close range, the barbarians climb the embankments and the legionaries. For hours, the horde crashes against the wall, and for hours the wall holds. But real history gave us Macrinus, a man driven by duty, un aristocrat, un stratégiste. He was not the hero that cinema invented. He was the hero that history, in its darkest hour, desperately needed. It is not a request, it is a desperate plea. In the command tent, the air is freezing. Pierced by 12 disciplined spears, the threat was destroyed. Rome was safe. It breaks the secondary lines, but finally crashes against the shield wall of the Praetorian Guard. And their friendship lasted until the death of the emperor. The Hollywood legend gave us Maximus, a hero driven by revenge. The fight is savage but brief. Ballomar, the king who united the tribes, dies at the foot of his nemesis' standard. Ballomar tries to decapitate the Roman army, to kill the architect of its destruction. His charge is heroic and unstoppable. His story was not a personal tragedy. It was the brutal and inglorious triumph of logic over chaos. The horde ceases to be an army. It becomes a terrified and trapped crowd. It is the last roar of the lion. Macrinus was received as a hero, the savior of the empire. Marcus Aurelius showered him with honors and riches.